The desert planet Ravos 4 was silent again. The wind moved slowly across the red sand, carrying the soft rattle of dry metal fences and the distant cry of desert birds. On a lonely ranch at the edge of the valley lived a man named Grant Hale, a retired human soldier. He had come here years ago after the great human-alien war ended. He wanted peace, not medals. He wanted quiet, not company. His ranch was small, filled with solar panels, an old barn, and a herd of lazy cattle that barely moved under the hot twin suns. Every morning he drank bitter coffee while watching the horizon. Every night he fixed broken machines or listened to old war radio messages that no one else cared about anymore. Grant had no neighbors, no visitors, no reason to speak. The last time he talked to another human was 2 years ago when a trader came by with fuel cells. Since then, silence was his only friend. He liked it that way. But on this night, something felt wrong. The wind was stronger than usual, carrying the smell of burning ozone, a smell Grant recognized from his soldier days. He looked up and saw faint streaks of light falling through the clouds. They weren't meteors. They were escape pods. Grant frowned. He grabbed his scanner and checked the radar. A small distress beacon blinked weakly on the screen, about 5 kilometers east of his ranch. He cursed under his breath. "Not my problem," he muttered. "Not anymore." He turned off the scanner and went back to his workbench. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert. A storm was coming, the kind that could strip the paint off metal. Grant shut the doors and checked his generator. But then he heard something, and faint knocking on the outer gate. Tap, tap, tap. At first he thought it was the wind again, but the tapping grew louder, then turned into pounding. He took his rifle from the wall and looked through the window slit. Lightning flashed across the sky, and in that flash he saw shadows moving through the rain. 11 figures, cloaked and bent, struggling against the wind. Grant's instincts came alive. He opened the door slightly, rifle ready. The figures stumbled closer until he could see their faces. Pale skin, faint bioluminescent lines across their temples, and eyes that glowed like silver glass. Aliens. The tallest one stepped forward. Her cloak was torn, her face bruised. She looked human enough to be familiar, yet strange enough to unsettle him. Her voice was weak but clear. "Please, human. We need shelter." Grant's finger tightened on the trigger. Every training memory screamed, "Don't trust them." But then the wind howled, nearly knocking the smaller figures to the ground. One of them, a young woman, collapsed right in front of his gate. He sighed and lowered his rifle. Inside, quickly, they hurried into the barn, dripping wet and shivering. Grant locked the door behind them. The storm hit full force, shaking the roof. He lit a lantern and finally got a proper look at his guests. There were 11 alien women, all dressed in worn-out travel suits. Their hands were marked with strange, glowing bracelets, and each had the same empty look in her eyes, grief and exhaustion. Grant handed them blankets and some hot water. "You can stay till the storm ends," he said gruffly. "Then you move on." The leader, the tall one with silver eyes, looked up at him. "We thank you," she said. "I am Liara, widow of Captain Thren of the Zyran fleet." Grant froze. The Zyran fleet, he remembered that name. He had fought them during the last battle of the war. If she was who she claimed, then all these women were widows of enemy soldiers. He walked away silently, but his mind was loud. Why were they here? How did they survive? And why did they come to his ranch, of all places on this planet? Hours passed. The storm outside roared like a beast. Grant sat by the fire, pretending to rest, but he couldn't stop watching them. The widows whispered to each other in their own language. Once he heard Liara mention something about the Hunters. The words made his blood run cold. He had heard of that name, a secret alien force that hunted survivors and deserters after the war. He quietly checked his scanner again. The distress beacon had stopped blinking, but a new signal appeared, multiple fast-moving objects approaching from orbit. "Damn," he whispered. "They led trouble right to my door." As the thunder rolled and lightning split the sky, Grant looked at the sleeping alien widows huddled together. His rifle rested beside him, his heart pounding. He knew what was coming, something big, something deadly, and for the first time in years, the silent ranch would not stay silent anymore. The storm passed by morning, but the ranch felt different. The air was thick, heavy with tension and the faint scent of alien medicine. Grant Hale stood by the door, staring out at the endless red horizon of Ravos 4. The silence he once loved now felt like a cage. Behind him, the 11 alien widows were awake. They moved carefully, quietly, as if afraid to disturb anything around them. Their leader, Liara, stood near the old heater, drying her silver-lined cloak. The light from the twin suns touched her face, and for a moment, she looked less like an enemy and more like someone lost. Grant poured himself a cup of bitter coffee. "Storm's gone," he said flatly. "You should leave before noon." Liara looked up, her silver eyes calm but unreadable. "Leave? And go where, human?" "The hunters are out there. We cannot survive the desert without shelter." He didn't answer. He didn't want to get involved. Not again. He walked outside, checking his fences and drone units. His scanner still showed faint energy trails from the night before. Ships had passed near his land. Whoever those hunters were, they weren't far. When he came back inside, Liara was tending to one of the younger widows, a girl barely older than 20. Her skin had strange glowing scars that pulsed weakly under the light. Grant noticed the bracelets again, small rings of light fused into their wrists. "What are those?" he asked, nodding toward them. Liara hesitated. The other widows went quiet. Finally, she said, "They are marks of our bond. Our husbands were soldiers of the Zyran fleet. These marks keep their memory alive and track those who still carry their name." Grant frowned. "Track you? By who?" Liara's voice lowered. "By the ones who want us erased. The Empire calls us traitors. We refused to join their new war. We ran. They sent hunters after us." Grant felt a chill crawl down his spine. "You mean your own kind is chasing you?" "Yes," she said softly. "We saw what they are planning. A new weapon born from human DNA taken during the war. They want to breed soldiers who feel no pain, no fear, no mercy. We stole the data and fled." He looked at her, unsure if he believed it. "And you brought that trouble here?" Liara's expression didn't change. "We brought it nowhere. It follows us. You gave us one night of safety. That is more than most humans would." Grant sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. He knew he should throw them out, let them take their fate. But something about Liara's calm courage reminded him of the soldiers he lost, the ones who never came home. The morning passed quietly. The widows helped clean the barn, repaired broken panels, and even fed the cattle. For beings who once served in an alien fleet, they worked with simple, practiced hands. Grant found himself watching them more than he wanted to admit. Later, as he repaired a drone, one of the widows approached him, a small woman with golden eyes. "Your machines," she said in a soft accent. "They use outdated human code. May I help?" He blinked. "You know tech?" She smiled faintly. "I was an engineer before the war took my husband." She crouched beside him and began tapping commands into the console. Within seconds, the drone's old red lights turned green again. Grant raised an eyebrow. "You just hacked my drone." "I fixed it," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. That was the first time he laughed in years. A short, rough sound that surprised even him. The widows smiled quietly, as if hearing laughter felt strange to them too. But the peace didn't last. At sunset, as the twin suns dipped behind the dunes, the repaired drone suddenly buzzed and displayed a flashing red warning. Grant rushed to check it. Unidentified signals detected. Multiple heat signatures moving fast from the west. Liara came running from the barn. "The hunters," she whispered. "How do you know?" She touched the glowing bracelet on her wrist. "Because they know where we are." Grant grabbed his rifle. "Then you should have left earlier." Liara stepped forward, eyes sharp. "And gone where, soldier?" "The desert is death. If they find us here, we will die fighting. But you—" She paused, her tone softening. "You can still leave." He looked at her, then at the others, frightened but standing tall, ready to face whatever came. He remembered the faces of human refugees he'd once failed to save during the war. Not again. He walked to his weapon locker, pulling out an old pulse rifle and a dusty case of explosives. "If they're coming," he said, loading a cartridge, "then we'll make them regret it." Liara's lips curved slightly. "You sound like a soldier again." "Just an old rancher who hates being hunted on his own land." Night fell fast on Ravos 4. The widows prepared the barn, sealing doors and powering up small alien shields from their packs. Grant moved through the shadows, setting traps and wiring defense points like the old days. The fear was back, but so was purpose. As the first lights of the hunter ships appeared on the horizon, Grant stood beside Liara on the roof. The wind howled, The desert glowed under the moonlight. "You should rest," she said quietly. "Rest?" Grant smiled grimly. Tomorrow there might not be a ranch left to rest in. Below them, engines roared. The hunters had arrived. And Grant Hale, the man who once swore to live alone, now stood ready to fight for 11 alien widows who carried the galaxy's most dangerous secret. The night of the Widow War had begun. The night sky over Ravos 4 burned with faint red lights. At first they looked like falling stars, but Grant Hale knew better. His old soldier's eyes could tell the difference between beauty and danger. Those weren't stars, they were dropships, and they were heading straight toward his ranch. Grant's heart beat slow but steady. Fear wasn't new to him, it was just an old friend visiting again. Inside the barn, the alien widows prepared quietly, their silver and violet eyes glowing in the dark. The hum of their strange devices mixed with the rattling wind. Liara, their leader, stood near the door, her hand resting on a small alien blade that shimmered faintly under the lantern light. "They will come before dawn," she said. "They always come in the dark." Grant adjusted the rifle on his shoulder and gave her a short nod. "Then we'll make them regret it." He stepped outside. The cold air hit his face, sharp and dry. He could see the faint dust rising in the west, signs of engines cutting through the sand. He tapped his wrist pad, activating the defense drones. Old machines, half rusted but still loyal. Their red lights flickered alive and began hovering into position. From the roof of the barn, the youngest widow, Rena, called out softly, "They are scanning the valley. I can jam their signal for a few minutes, but not long." Grant looked up. "A few minutes is all I need." He opened an old metal case on the ground. Inside were small, round explosives, his last reminder of the war. He began planting them near the fences, one by one, his boots sinking into the soft red dust. As he worked, memories came back. The screams, the chaos, the fire of battle. But this time felt different. He wasn't fighting for orders or medals. He was fighting for people who had no one left. Inside the barn, Liara gathered the widows. "We cannot win if they see us as prey," she said quietly. "We stand together or we die together." They nodded. Even the youngest ones, shaking with fear, picked up weapons from the crates, some alien, some human. The barn smelled of oil, dust, and tension. The first dropship landed in the distance. Its lights cut through the darkness like knives. The hum of its engines made the ground tremble. Grant crouched behind a dune, looking through his scope. He could see armored figures stepping out, black suits with glowing green visors. The hunters. There were at least 20 of them. He whispered to himself. Too many. Liara's voice came through his comm device, soft but steady. "What do you see?" "Trouble," he said. "And a lot of it." The hunters began moving in formation, scanning the ground with bright beams. One of them found a set of footprints, alien and human mixed. The leader signaled to the others. They spread out. Grant waited until they were close enough. His finger hovered over the detonator. The widows watched from the barn windows, silent and tense. Then Grant pressed the button. The desert exploded. Flames shot high into the air as the sand turned to glass. The first wave of hunters vanished in fire. The shockwave rolled across the valley, shaking the barn. The widows flinched but stayed still. Liara whispered, "He fights like one of us." Before Grant could breathe, a second dropship roared overhead, releasing drones that began scanning from above. The hunters adjusted fast, professional killers. They started firing toward the barn. Blue plasma bolts tore through the night, slicing wooden walls and burning through the ground. Grant ran toward cover, firing his rifle. 2 of the hunters fell. Another aimed a heavy blaster, but before he could shoot, Rena's jamming device blinked. His gun froze. Liara leapt from the barn entrance, slashing through his armor with her glowing blade. The alien soldier dropped in the sand, lifeless. The fight spread across the ranch. Sparks flew, lights blinked, screams echoed in the night. Grant threw another grenade, taking out a line of enemies near the fence. But there were too many. The hunters kept advancing step by step. Inside the barn, one of the widows screamed as a plasma bolt hit the door. The shield flickered and died. Grant shouted, "Fall back! Inside now!" Liara and the widows rushed in, covering each other as fire rained down around them. Grant slammed the door shut and locked it. The air inside was thick with smoke and fear. "They'll burn us out," one widow cried. Grant looked around. His eyes stopped at an old underground hatch in the floor, an old escape tunnel from the war days. He kicked it open. "Down here, move." The widows began climbing down one by one. Liara stayed till the last. "You come too, human," she said firmly. Grant shook his head. "I'll buy you time." Her eyes widened. "You'll die." "Not tonight," he said, giving her a small, rough smile. He waited until they were safe below, then climbed to the roof, rifle in hand. The hunters were closing in, their armor glowing in the moonlight. He could see their leader now, a tall figure with a jagged scar across his helmet. The man spoke through a speaker, his voice cold and distorted. "Give us the fugitives, human, and you live. Protect them, and you die with them." Grant spat into the sand. "Guess I die then." He fired the last explosive, blowing the main gate apart and taking half the hunter squad with it. The leader staggered but survived, shouting orders in a harsh alien tongue. Grant dove for cover, heart pounding. He could hear the widows moving underground, whispering plans. Liara's voice echoed faintly through his comm. "We will return. Don't fall, human." He smiled grimly, reloading. "Just hurry." Above the burning ranch, the wind screamed across the desert. The hunters closed in, and in that moment Grant Hale, the man who once sought peace, became a warrior once more. The battle for the silent ranch had truly begun. The night sky of Ravos 4 was burning. Smoke curled up from the ranch and the air smelled of metal and fire. Grant Hale crouched behind a half-destroyed wall, reloading his rifle. His breathing was heavy, his hands shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. In the distance, the hunters regrouped. Their dark armor reflected the flames from the wrecked barn. They moved with perfect precision, silent and merciless. Above them, drones hovered, scanning for life. Every few seconds, bright plasma bolts cut through the darkness. Inside the underground tunnel, Liara and the widows waited in silence. The sound of explosions above them made the ground tremble. Dust fell from the ceiling. Rena gripped her glowing bracelet tightly, whispering, "He's still fighting." Liara's voice was calm, but her eyes burned with conflict. "He should have escaped with us. But he fights for strangers. For us." Another explosion shook the tunnel. One of the younger widows began to cry. Liara put a hand on her shoulder. "Enough hiding," she said. "We owe him our lives. We fight." She climbed up the ladder before anyone could stop her. The others followed, one by one, until the widows emerged into the chaos of the burning ranch. Grant nearly fired when he saw movement behind the flames, but then Liara's voice cut through the smoke. "Human, we stand with you." He turned and saw them, 11 glowing figures stepping through the fire, blades and alien rifles in their hands. Their bracelets pulsed in rhythm, like hearts beating as one. The sight made even the hunters pause. Grant shouted, "You're insane." "They'll kill you." Liara's lips curved into a fierce smile. "Then we die fighting." The hunters opened fire. Blue bolts rained down, searing through the air. But this time the widows were ready. Rena threw a small orb that burst into a web of shimmering light, a shield dome. The plasma bolts exploded harmlessly against it, lighting up the sky like fireworks. Grant ducked beside her, blinking in disbelief. "You had this tech all along?" "We were saving it," Rena replied with a wink. For the right moment, Grant grinned. "Guess this is it." Liara gave the order and the widows split into pairs, moving fast through the wreckage. Their blades glowed brighter in the smoke, cutting through the hunter's armor with deadly precision. Every move was silent, graceful, efficient. Grant covered them with sniper fire, picking off the enemy's flank. His aim was sharp. Years of war had never left him. Each shot echoed across the valley. Each target fell like a shadow fading. But there were too many. A second wave of hunters dropped from the ships above. Their armor shimmered with a red glow, an upgraded unit. The leader, the one with the scarred helmet, pointed his weapon forward. "End it," he ordered. Grant saw it coming. A heavy plasma launcher charging up. He dove, shouting, "Down!" The explosion ripped through the shield, throwing everyone back. The widows hit the ground hard. Grant's ears rang, his vision blurred. When the smoke cleared, the ranch was nearly gone. Only part of the barn remained standing. The widows regrouped, some bleeding, some limping, but none running. Liara looked at the fallen walls, then at Grant. "If we fall here, the secret dies with us." Grant pushed himself up, coughing. "Then we make sure we don't fall." He pointed toward the main generator, still humming weakly under the sand. If we overload that thing, it'll take out half this valley. Rena gasped. That will kill you too. Grant's smile was tired but steady. Yeah, probably. But it'll stop them. Liara stared at him for a long moment. Humans, she whispered, always willing to burn everything for one good reason. Not everything, Grant said. Just the right things. He ran toward the generator while the widows formed a line between him and the enemy. Plasma bolts screamed past them. One widow fell, another took her place. Their bracelets glowed brighter, forming a web of light around Liara as she led the defense. Grant reached the generator, opened the panel, and started rewiring it. Sparks flew. The countdown began. 30 seconds, Liara, he shouted. Get them clear! But she didn't move. Instead, she ran toward him, firing her blaster at the incoming hunters. We don't leave you! Don't argue! He yelled back, yanking another wire. You wanted to survive, then go! She crouched beside him, voice fierce. We survived together. The leader of the hunters charged, raising his weapon. Grant turned too late, but Liara jumped in front of him, her blade slicing the alien's gun in half. The weapon exploded, throwing them both backward. Grant hit the ground, pain shooting through his shoulder. He looked up and saw Liara's bracelet flickering. She was hurt, her glow dimming. Liara, he shouted, crawling to her. She smiled weakly. Finish it, human! He slammed his fist on the final switch. The generator screamed, the light inside turning blinding white. He grabbed Liara's arm, pulling her toward the tunnel. The widows saw them and began running too. The explosion came a heartbeat later, white fire swallowing the ranch, the hunters, and half the valley in a single flash. The sound tore through the desert like thunder. When the light faded, silence returned. Only ash and smoke drifted where the ranch once stood. Minutes passed before a hand rose from the rubble. Grant coughed, pulling himself up. Beside him, Liara stirred, alive but weak. Around them, the widows emerged one by one from the debris, coughing, crying, laughing. They had survived. The hunters were gone. The sky was quiet again. Grant looked at the ruins of his home and let out a long breath. Guess I'll need a new roof, he muttered. Liara smiled faintly. We can help rebuild. You saved us. He looked at her, then at the others. No, he said softly. We saved each other. For the first time in years, Grant Hale didn't feel alone. The silent ranch was gone, but something stronger had taken its place, a family born from fire. And as the twin suns began to rise over the ashes, the human and the widow stood together knowing this was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater. Morning came slowly over the ruins of the ranch. The desert air was still, quiet and heavy with the smell of burnt metal and smoke. The twin suns rose over the horizon, turning the sand into a golden sea. Grant Hale sat on what used to be his porch, now only a pile of blackened wood and twisted iron. His rifle lay beside him, its barrel scorched from the night before. The battle had ended, but the silence felt heavier than ever. Behind him, the 11 alien widows moved carefully through the ruins, searching for anything useful. Their glowing bracelets were dim now, their light flickering like dying embers. Liara, the silver-eyed leader, walked toward Grant. Her cloak was torn, and dust clung to her pale skin, but she still carried herself with quiet strength. You should rest, she said softly. Grant didn't look at her. Ranch is gone. Rest can wait. Liara stood beside him, following his gaze toward the horizon. You risked your life for us. Why? He gave a tired smile. Habit, I guess. Soldiers don't retire from doing the right thing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the crackle of small fires dying out across the field. Then Liara said quietly, One of us didn't make it. Grant turned. 10 widows were gathered near the barn's wreckage, standing in silence around a broken shield generator. Rena was holding something, a glowing bracelet with its light fading away. Grant felt a heavy ache in his chest. I'm sorry, Liara nodded, her expression unreadable. She died free. That is more than our husbands ever had. Grant stood, brushing the dust off his hands. We can bury her here. The ground's soft near the ridge. Liara's eyes softened. You honor her like one of your own. He didn't answer. He just picked up a shovel and began digging. The widows joined him, silent and graceful, their hands glowing faintly as they shaped the sand. When the grave was finished, Liara placed the bracelet inside and whispered a few words in her language, a song-like prayer. The melody carried across the wind, sad yet beautiful. Grant stood beside her, head bowed. For the first time, he realized how human her voice sounded when it broke. After the burial, they built a small camp from the wreckage. Grant used parts of the broken drones to make power cells. The widows repaired a few of their alien shields to create shelter. For a moment it felt almost peaceful, but inside him Grant felt the old question rising. Why did they really come here? Later that evening he found Liara sitting near the fire, staring at the stars. Her face glowed in the light, her silver eyes reflecting the sky. He sat beside her. You said you stole something from your empire. Something about human DNA. I think it's time you tell me the whole story. Liara looked into the fire for a long time before she spoke. You humans. You don't realize how close you came to destruction. During the war, your kind fought with courage, not numbers. The Empire couldn't understand it. How fragile beings like you could win against stronger armies. So they began to study you, Grant frowned. Study us? She nodded. They captured soldiers. They tested your blood, your pain, your instincts. They discovered something. Something they feared and wanted at the same time. Grant's jaw tightened. What was it? Liara met his gaze. The ability to care. The power to fight not for orders, but for someone else. That was the strength your DNA carried. The secret of your survival. Grant stared at the fire, silent. He remembered the faces of his squad mates. Men and women who fought for each other, not for medals or planets. Liara continued, her voice trembling slightly. The Empire wanted to copy it. They planned to create a new generation of soldiers, part alien, part human, programmed for loyalty, stripped of emotion, but still carrying your will to survive. My husband was part of that project. When I learned the truth, I tried to stop it. That's why they branded me a traitor. Grant looked at her, the anger in his chest slowly turning into understanding. So you ran? And the others? They were wives of the scientists. We escaped together with the research data. We thought we could destroy it. She paused, her voice breaking. But it's hidden in one of our bracelets. That's why they hunt us, Grant exhaled slowly. So that's the secret. You're carrying the one thing that could restart the war. Liara nodded. Yes, and now it's here on your planet. Silence filled the air again. The fire crackled softly. Finally, Grant said, You could have left me out of it. Liara looked at him with tired eyes. Would you have wanted that? He thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, I guess not. They both laughed quietly, not out of joy, but relief. For the first time, Liara's guard seemed to lower. You know, she said softly, when we first saw your face, we were afraid. You reminded us of everything we lost. But now, she hesitated. You remind me that maybe not all humans are our enemies. Grant smiled faintly. And maybe not all aliens are mine. A soft wind passed through the camp. Liara's hair shimmered in the firelight. She turned to look at him, really look at him. And for a brief second, the world seemed smaller, quieter. But then Rena's voice broke the silence. Liara, you should see this. They both stood quickly and hurried to the scanner Rena had rebuilt from Grant's old drone. The screen flickered with static, then displayed a faint signal. 3 more ships entering orbit. Grant's calm face hardened again. They're not done with us. Liara's silver eyes glowed brighter. Then neither are we. And as the fire crackled behind them, the bond between the human and the alien widow was no longer just about survival. It had become something deeper, fragile, dangerous, and real. The desert wind carried their promise into the night. They would not run anymore. The desert of Ravos 4 slept under cold stars, but at Grant Hale's ruined ranch, there was no sleep, only movement, quiet and determined. Sparks from broken machinery lit the sand as humans and aliens worked side by side. Grant knelt beside a generator shell, wiring cables with steady hands. The smell of burnt plastic and fuel filled the air. Across from him, Liara calibrated her alien blasters, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Around them, the widows rebuilt old drones, sharpened blades, and fortified what was left of the ranch. They all knew what the signal meant. The hunters were coming back, and this time they wouldn't send scouts. They'd send an army. Grant's voice was calm as he spoke. We don't have much time. The ships will enter atmosphere before dawn. Rena, her arm still bandaged from the last battle, asked, Do we run again? Liara shook her head. Run where? There's nowhere left to hide. If they take this planet, they'll find others like us. We end it here. Grant looked at her, nodding slowly. Then we make this place a trap. He opened a metal case filled with small explosive spheres, relics from his war days. We plant these around the perimeter. When their troops land, the whole valley will light up. And if that's not enough, I'll trigger the main reactor. It'll burn everything within a mile. Rena's eyes widened. That will kill you too. Grant gave a faint smile. Yeah, that's the point. Liara stood abruptly. No, you will not die for us. Not again. He met her gaze. You said it yourself. Your empire wants the data hidden in your bracelets. If we die with it, they lose. That's a good trade. Liara's jaw tightened. There must be another way. Grant shook his head. There isn't. Silence fell over the camp. The widows exchanged glances, their glowing bracelets pulsing softly like anxious hearts. Finally, Liara turned away, whispering something in her language, a word Grant didn't understand but could feel. Defiance. Hours passed. The desert wind carried whispers through the dunes. Above them, streaks of light appeared, the hunters' ships breaking through the clouds. Grant stood on the ridge, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes narrowed. They're early. Liara joined him, her cloak fluttering in the wind. They're afraid of us now. That makes them dangerous, he glanced at her. Afraid of you, maybe. I'm just a rancher with a bad back and an attitude problem. Liara smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried sadness and strength at once. You're more than that, Grant Hale. You are what my people feared most, a human who refuses to surrender. He looked at her for a long moment, the silence between them heavier than words. Then he said softly, You should go below with the others. Once this starts, Liara interrupted, stepping closer. If you stay, I stay. You gave us hope when we had none. I will not watch you die alone. Grant's heart ached at her words. He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. As the first dropship descended, the widows activated their defenses. Blue energy shields flickered to life around the camp. The ground trembled as the enemy landed. Black-armored hunters, hundreds of them, marching in formation. From above, bright lights cut through the night. Grant could see their leader again, the one with the scarred helmet. He held a loudspeaker in one hand, his voice echoing across the valley. Surrender the fugitives and the data. The human may live. Grant's voice boomed back through the dust and wind. Come and take them. The leader raised his hand. The sky erupted. Missiles streaked toward the camp, explosions ripping through the sand. Grant and Liara dove for cover as shockwaves shook the ground. The widows returned fire, their alien rifles blazing arcs of light across the battlefield. The air filled with smoke, fire, and screams. Grant moved like a machine. His old instincts came alive again. He rolled from cover to cover, firing precise bursts, taking down hunter squads one by one. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning targets for him. Liara fought beside him, swift, fearless, her blade glowing white-hot as it cut through enemy armor. Every time Grant looked up, she was there, moving through the chaos like a storm of light. But the hunters kept coming. For every one that fell, two more landed. The ground burned. The ranch, once his quiet home, had turned into a war zone again. Liara! He shouted over the roar of gunfire. The east shield's failing. I'm on it, she called back, sprinting across the sand. Plasma fire chased her, but she slid behind a fallen wall and fired back, covering the others. Rena crawled beside Grant, bleeding but smiling. You humans, always making last stands. Grant reloaded his rifle and said, Someone has to show them what stubborn looks like. Then the ground shook violently. The main reactor behind the camp sparked, damaged from the earlier blast. Grant's heart sank. The overload had begun. Too early. He turned toward Liara. It's unstable. Get them out of here. She stared at him, horror in her eyes. You're not staying behind again. But Grant was already moving. He sprinted toward the reactor, firing at the hunters chasing him. Go, he shouted. That's an order. For a moment, Liara froze, torn between rage and grief. Then she grabbed Rena's hand and yelled, Everyone fall back to the ridge. Now. As the widows retreated, Liara looked back one last time. Through the fire and smoke, she saw Grant standing at the heart of the chaos, battered, bleeding but unbroken. He met her eyes across the battlefield, and in that fleeting moment she understood what he meant without words. Protect the future. End the war. The reactor roared, its light turning blinding white. The hunters stopped firing, realizing too late what was happening. Grant whispered to himself, "For peace," and pressed the final switch. A wave of light swept across the desert, silent, pure, unstoppable. The night exploded. When the dust settled hours later, only silence remained. The hunters were gone. The battlefield was glass and ash. On the far ridge, the widows stood together, their bracelets still glowing faintly. Liara's eyes searched the horizon, her voice breaking. "Grant." No answer came, only the wind, but deep beneath the melted sand something stirred. A weak heartbeat, human and alive. The last stand was not the end. It was the beginning of legend. The suns of Ravos 4 rose slowly, spreading golden light across the endless dunes. The wind moved softly now, carrying no sound of war, only silence deep and sacred. The battlefield that had once burned with fury was still, blanketed in a layer of silver dust and glassed sand that shimmered like frozen fire. The widows stood on the ridge where they had watched the world explode hours before. None spoke. Their glowing bracelets flickered weakly, dimmed by grief and exhaustion. The air still smelled of smoke and metal, but it also carried something else, the weight of loss mixed with the faint scent of peace. Liara knelt in the sand, her silver eyes searching the wasteland below. The ground was scorched where the ranch once stood. Nothing remained of the fences, the generator, or the barn, only twisted ruins swallowed by light. "He's gone," whispered Rena, her voice trembling. Liara didn't answer. Her hands dug into the sand, ignoring the heat. "No," she said quietly, her tone like steel. "He's not gone. Not him." The other widows exchanged uncertain looks but stayed silent. They had seen Grant Hale's final act, the light that had swallowed everything, and still, their leader refused to accept what her heart screamed. Liara rose slowly, her cloak torn and her face streaked with dirt. "Spread out," she commanded. "Search the crater. If there's even a fragment, we'll find him." For hours they searched, moving carefully through the wreckage. The sun climbed higher, burning their skin and drying their throats, but none stopped. They found pieces of hunter armor melted into the sand, shattered weapons, and the remains of destroyed drones. Then Rena's voice broke the silence. "Over here!" Liara ran toward her. Beneath a slab of metal half buried in the sand, a human hand reached upward, burned, trembling but alive. Liara dropped to her knees and dug furiously until she uncovered him. Grant Hale. His face was blackened with ash, his uniform torn, but his chest rose weakly with each breath. One side of his face was cut and his hair was singed, but his eyes, his stubborn human eyes, opened slowly when she touched his shoulder. Still. "Here," he rasped, voice rough as gravel. "Told you. Hard to kill." Liara's heart broke and healed at the same time. She laughed, a sound mixed with tears. "You fool," she whispered. "You were supposed to run." He smiled faintly. "You'd never forgive me." The widows surrounded them, their glowing bracelets pulsing brighter now, responding to his heartbeat. Rena knelt beside him, placing her hand over his wound. Her bracelet glowed white, spreading warmth across his chest. "Human and Zyran energy," she said softly. "It's compatible. He'll live." Liara brushed a strand of hair from his face. "You rest now, soldier. You've done enough." But Grant shook his head weakly. "Not yet. There's something you need to do," she frowned. "What?" He pointed toward the wreckage of the reactor. "The data coordinate survived, buried under the main conduit. You have to destroy it completely. Don't let them rebuild what we stopped." Liara hesitated, torn between duty and the man lying broken before her. But Grant's voice grew firmer. "Promise me, Liara." She held his gaze and nodded. "I promise." By sunset, the widows had found the half-melted core. Together, they buried it deep in the desert and activated their bracelets. A pulse of light spread outward, erasing every trace of the weapon's code from existence. The Empire would never have their abomination again. When they returned, Grant was resting near the crater's edge. The light of the twin suns painted his scarred face in gold. "It's done," Liara said. "The data is gone forever." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe. The galaxy gets one more chance." Rena approached, holding a small device made from salvaged tech. "This can send a message off-world," she said. "Not a distress call, something better." "A story," Grant looked at her. "A story?" Rena nodded. People should know what happened here, that a human and 11 alien widows stood together when no one else would. Liara placed the transmitter beside him. You tell it. It's your story too, Grant chuckled weakly. Nah, it's ours. He pressed the button. The device hummed, its blue light flashing into the sky like a beacon. Far above the planet, the signal spread through the void, carrying a single message across the stars. On Ravos 4, enemies became family. The war ends here weeks past. The widows built a new home from the ruins. They planted crops where the battlefield once burned. The ranch, reborn from ashes, became a refuge for travelers, humans, aliens, anyone seeking peace. Grant recovered slowly, though his body carried new scars, and his hair had turned more silver than gray. He spent his mornings teaching the widows how to repair human machines, and his evenings listening to their strange, haunting songs. Liara stayed by his side. Sometimes they spoke of the war, sometimes they didn't speak at all. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was peace. One evening, as the suns dipped low and painted the desert in amber light, Liara stood beside him on the porch of the new house. The wind was warm, carrying the smell of fresh grain and oil. Do you ever miss your old life? She asked softly. Grant looked at the horizon. Sometimes. But this, he gestured toward the fields where the widows laughed as they worked. This feels like something worth living for. Liara smiled, her silver eyes glowing like the stars just beginning to appear. You gave us a home, Grant Hale. The galaxy will remember that. He turned to her, voice gentle. Then promise me one thing. What is it? When they remember me, he said, make sure they remember you too. Liara's eyes softened. They will, because your name will live with ours. The wind carried her words into the night, mixing with the sound of laughter and distant song. Above them, the first stars shone brighter, as if the universe itself was listening. And so, on the quiet world of Ravos 4, where once there was war, now there was hope. A retired human and 11 alien widows had rewritten the story of enemies and survivors. They had built not just shelter, but a new dawn.